Hey, I done told you I'm gonna stay consistent. I'm back again with another one. I'm talking about, you ain't gonna believe this shit. These folks think they Walter White. Somebody over there in Canada, damn, my bad, in Canada. Somebody over there in Canada think they got damn Gus Fring. Now, I ain't read all the stories just yet, cause I don't know, maybe they was selling chicken, but they for sure was cooking up some shit up in that Superlab. Watch this little story, it's a little long, but they gonna break it down.
Imagine, you live in this tiny rural town of about 1,000 people, about an hour outside of Kamloops, BC. One day, you wake up and there are hundreds of police officers swarming a rural property down your street. That property, you find out, is what police call the biggest, most sophisticated drug lab in Canadian history.
Like something out of Breaking Bad.
It's just incredible. It's overwhelming.
People were just really stunned.
The RCMP calls this a superlab, producing an unprecedented amount of illicit drugs. In total, they recovered almost 400 kilos of meth, 54 kilos of fentanyl, that's tens of millions of doses, plus smaller amounts of MDMA and cocaine. And that's just the stuff that was ready, waiting to be shipped out. Investigators say this lab had enough source material on hand to potentially triple that output.
These enforcement actions have undoubtedly saved thousands of lives in Canada. It has also served to deny this transnational organized crime group an estimated $485 million in profits.
And this wasn't just about drugs. 400 kilometers away in Surrey, BC, they also say they recovered 46 handguns, 21 AR-15 style rifles, 14 submachine guns, at least 2 50 caliber rifles capable of shooting through concrete walls, explosives, body armor, and $500,000 in cash.
When they laid them out, it did look like, enough firepower to arm a sizable militia, honestly.
But even all this risks missing the bigger picture, because what also shocked investigators was just how elaborate the whole operation was, what it tells them about who might have been involved and how far-reaching this network might just be. Let's go through it. There was one word the RCMP kept using over and over to describe this lab.
It is extremely sophisticated, highly sophisticated, sophisticated.
So what do they mean by that? Well, here's a look at one of the rooms inside, courtesy of the RCMP. We spoke to the head of the team investigating this super lab, and we reached out to 2 chemists with expertise in illicit drug manufacturing to try and break down what exactly was going on here and what makes this lab so sophisticated.
This one certainly had the equipment, certainly had the chemicals on hand and the precursors to continue a high level of production.
Let's start with equipment. Those big green jugs in the back probably caught your eye first. According to the RCMP, they're a type of chemical reactor, literally where ingredients are added and drugs are synthesized.
So we call them jacketed reactors, meaning that they're sort of like a double wall. Outside that green, that's kind of like a coolant system that keeps the reaction controlled in temperature.
Controlled, by the way, so that it doesn't explode. These are volatile compounds. And this is specialty equipment that you don't just walk into a hardware store and buy. The chemists we spoke to figure per machine, the cost could be up to $100,000.
They are often made especially for the drug producers because they are very large size and they're sort of made to specification, if you like. And so it's a huge amount of investment, huge amount of money.
Then there's this. Not something police believe is used at all in the mass manufacture of illicit drugs. It looks more like an experimental setup, something you'd see in an R&D lab.
It's that piece of equipment there that really gleaned my attention. It's interesting because that's a very scientific type of equipment typically we don't see in a drug lab.
In fact, police in BC tell us they've never seen this in a meth or fentanyl lab before. One possibility they're considering is that criminals were using it to experiment, to come up with new, perhaps more potent types of fentanyl. Health Canada is even taking samples to confirm if that is the case.
And if it does, it potentially gets us, an advance notice of maybe a future trend of drug production or a different method of drug production that that we haven't seen here before.
Here's another view of the lab from the RCMP, a different room. And this is a chemical minefield. These barrels, they should be chained to the wall so that they don't fall over. According to our experts, they're likely some kind of highly toxic, highly flammable solvent. And these white bags, most likely drug-making ingredients so corrosive, you'd get a chemical burn just by touching it. But consider one other thing. What experts say is the most foundational ingredient, the one you can't make a drug without, and what's called a precursor.
So a precursor is basically sort of like a building block of the molecule, of the final molecule. So a lot of the precursors are now starting to make it on the controlled substance lists in various countries. But it's still these cooks. When they want to cook something, they still find a way.
The RCMP says they found a significant volume of these precursor chemicals at this lab. About 5,000 liters of liquid precursor and 10 tons of powder. Enough to continue to churn out meth and fentanyl for weeks, if not months, without having to restock.
It's not just an average citizen that can wake up tomorrow and decide to import quantities of precursors.
I was surprised to see how much they had and how readily available they were able to access it.
But it wasn't just the existence or amount of precursor chemicals that startled the RCMP. It looks like they were actually making their own, which is a whole other level of expertise.
And of a particular concern is the discovery of several tons of unregulated chemicals believed to be used to produce P2P.
P2P is one of those precursors we talked about. It's one of the base ingredients used to make meth. It is a heavily controlled substance, and because of that, it's hard to find. It's also hard to make. So finding evidence that this group was manufacturing P2P from scratch, that's like the RCMP cracking an art heist and finding the Mona Lisa.
You do need to have people who have some chemical knowledge, especially when producing large quantities of chemicals. So you might have what's called a chemical engineer who's been working in industry and he knows what it involves. It could be a very well organized situation.
As most people know from the TV series or Breaking Bad, that was their method.
If you're a Breaking Bad fan, you might remember Walt starts out his meth-making career by using pseudoephedrine as a precursor. That's in sinus medicine. This has been the most common route in North America over the past few decades. But a few seasons in, Walt links up with Gus, who connects him with a P2P dealer. And it's P2P that lets him suddenly create a much purer product with much better margins. And I promise I'm going somewhere with this, because eventually him and Jesse link up with the Mexican cartel and find out that they actually make their own P2P.
They synthesize their own.
What?
The P2P manufacturing method has been the primary method used by Mexican cartels to produce methamphetamine for years. This brought the level of sophistication of this operation to an unprecedented level, certainly in Western Canada, if not the entire country.
If we go back inside the BC Superlab, the chemists we spoke to suspect that's what may have been going on inside this room here. You can see the network of metal ducting they installed, which looks like it's meant to channel fumes outside. Making P2P can create some seriously toxic gases. Again, probably not something a low-level Canadian gang would try and attempt.
And so what that suggests and what the RCMP is saying is that, this is a multi-international cross-border operation with fingers into all sorts of places.
So the RCMP brought up that suspected connection to the Mexican cartel. They wouldn't go into much more detail about who else might be involved. So we asked someone who used to run the RCMP's transnational organized crime unit what he thought.
I think they've got to have significant contacts in different parts of the world. I'd be looking at the cartel networks, the Chinese networks, the Iranian networks, but whoever it is, looking at the quantity, that's a corporation, that's not gangs.
We're hearing more and more people who follow gangs and report on gangs, at least here in BC, that there are these international connections, that the old narrative of these international drug gangs fighting each other is that it's old. More and more they are cooperating.
The RCMP was also clear that these drugs, for the most part, were headed for other countries.
They were destined for abroad, and I can't elaborate quite yet because it's an ongoing investigation, but they were destined for a market abroad.
If the cartels want to expand and operate to the new markets in the Asian Pacific area, Vancouver has the logistical infrastructure, i.e. ports, to access this new market, that they haven't really tapped into in the last several decades, i.e. Asian Pacific, 3 billion people.
Asia Pacific meaning countries like China, Japan, India, Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand. All to say, everyone we spoke to believes the scale of this operation is immense and something that should give people pause, especially considering only one person has been arrested so far.
Now you better not even act like that ain't some crazy ass shit. These folks is putting that real bread up. I wonder who it is. Like, they found the lab, you know what I'm saying? But they ain't, they talking about a lot of shit they seized. They ain't showing nobody that they done arrested. I don't know if they trying to keep them low because the nigga finna snitch. I don't know what's going on with that, you know what I'm saying? But I will say this, man. I know my folks, man. We gotta get our shit together. We gotta stop all these games we be playing. Look at what the fuck is going on out here. We be thinking we be doing something with our little 20 bowls, our little 50 bowls, our little 100 piece, you know what I'm saying? That just touched down in the city. We think we the man, cause man, this city little as hell and ain't nothing in this motherfucker expensive. You know what I'm saying? Not compared to the world, not compared to what the fuck is going on, what you seeing in this video. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know. Oh man, I hate the mindset, you know what I'm saying? The mindset that we got here, you know what I'm saying? Cause it's like, if we gonna do this shit, let's do it the biggest, the largest, you know what I'm saying? It's a handful of niggas who's doing it big, you know what I'm saying? Done it big and all of that, but I mean, just as a people, like, if we gonna play, like, we might as well go ahead and play for real, like, really be about this shit and really be trying to get it how these folks getting it, because shit, I mean, maybe they was dusting for fingerprints or something, but I don't see nobody arrested. Ain't nobody hemmed up. So that lets you know one thing for sure. Trappin is not dead, my brothers.